We've got 25 people in the room. That's good enough for me. Thank you for joining me. It's a beautiful day outside. Obviously, everyone's got better things to do. So here we are doing a live stream on a Sunday in May. It is gorgeous outside. I got 82 degrees here right now. And was out yesterday quite a bit. I ran around. I went down to a Cars and Coffee in Birmingham, met a guy with a backdraft Cobra a lot like mine, talked to him for a while, met a bunch of other very nice people. Actually ran into a guy who looks at me and he's listening to me and he goes, "You sound familiar." He didn't say you look familiar. He goes, "You sound familiar." And I said, "Sound? What are you talking about?" He goes, "Are you on the radio or something?" I said, "Well, I used to be, but now I have a YouTube channel." He goes, "That's it? VinWiki." I said, "Well, I've been on VinWiki a couple times." He goes, "Yeah, I've seen them all." And I said, "Okay, well, I have my own channel." He goes, "Really?" So he didn't know that. But talked to him for a while, talked to a whole bunch of people, very, very nice people. And then I actually got a chance to swing by the house I grew up in and took my dad for a ride in my Cobra. And my dad's in his 90s. So I was really, really mellow. I did not stomp on it while he was in it with me. But my dad's always loved convertibles. He had a whole string of convertibles back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And so we were puttering around town, just enjoying the weather because it was a beautiful day yesterday also. Ran into a whole bunch of other people I know, had some good times. And then last night went to see Morris Day and the Time. What time is it? At Music Hall in Detroit. And it was a fabulous show. And in fact, I was blown away. I really was. I've always known who the guy is. Of course, he was in Purple Rain with his band, and he had a couple albums that went gold, had a bunch of songs that got radio airplay nationally. And so I was expecting, well, there'll be a bunch of songs I recognize, and then we'll go from there. The whole show from beginning to end was great. And he did a lot of the stuff that you know him from, the dancing, and he's got the valet with the mirror so he can comb his hair. It was amazing. It was amazing. So I had a great time. And also got down a little early, but then wound up being just on time because we made the mistake of driving past Little Caesars Arena where Megan Thee Stallion was performing. And so there's a huge crowd of people out milling around. So it took us about as long to get from the last mile there as it took to get all the way down to Detroit. But it was a good time. And for those who say Detroit's not hopping, well, it is hopping, at least on some nights like last night. So that was a lot of fun. But thanks for checking in today. Scott Argyle's checking in from West Jordan, Utah. Storm Raven from Oklahoma. Q Dude just gives me the wave. I assume that's what that means. Hammond Egger checking in from Marin County, California. Joe Dirt, hi, Steve from Texas. Patty V, is there a statute of limitations on how long the city of Lansing come after me for city income taxes? I'm not sure how that works because most of the tax statutes run rather long. And it also depends on whether they've notified you that you owe the money or they simply missed it and forgot about it. But I wouldn't claim to be a tax expert. I've always hated working in towns that had city taxes. Detroit has them and Flint has them. And I can tell you that I worked in Flint at a radio station that literally moved just to be outside city limits, so they didn't have to do that anymore. But I taught at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law in downtown Detroit, drove past it last night, and had taxes taken out for the city of Detroit. And you might go with Steve, how much was it really? It wasn't that much, but number one, it's money. And number two, you got to file a tax return with the city. The feds, okay. The state, the city, and so I have a guy who does my taxes, and the guy had to do 3 tax returns. Now, don't get me wrong. The city of Detroit and the state of Michigan aren't that difficult to do. The real lifting, the heavy lifting comes with the Fed. But it was always annoying to me that they took money from a guy who comes down and sometimes is simply teaching 1 night a week or 2 nights a week. So Inspector Mike's checking in from Bourbonnais, Illinois. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but you never know. I bet it's got some silent letters just like Illinois does. Although people do say Illinois. Going to Chicago, Illinois. Josh Jagminas checking from Burnsville, Minnesota. The town, of course, named after Mr. Montgomery Burns, I assume. What else could it be? Hemet Valley Honey Company. Hey, from Hemet, California. Convective Productions. Hello from OKC. I love your content. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for checking in. I appreciate that. I love seeing names I've never seen before. 10 by Bowlers at 10X Bowl. Greetings from Gulfport, Mississippi. The Big Sign from Kansas City. And M. Kolba sends greets from Milwaukee. Pat Z, hello. MG Mustang 05, government never forgets about taxes owed. But I remember taking a class in law school about taxes and reading a case about Johnny Unitas and a car he won with the NFL. I don't know, he's MVP of something. Long story, but I don't remember it well enough to even tell you about it, so I can't. Ram 50 V8 checking in. Thank you very much, my friend. David Sanderson's checking from the ghetto of Memphis, Tennessee. I always liked Memphis. I've been there a few times. Big Kappa High from St. Louis. Patty V says about $600 from 2013 or 2014. Of course, that's more than 10 years ago. And the longest statute of limitations I've ever heard of is 7. But like I said, the statute can get told, like if they said, hey, you owe us the money, you can't then just drag your feet and say, well, they still didn't get it from me. So, Dr. Rick, I was looking forward to seeing and hearing you. I hope you can do both right now. Can you? Catilla the Hun, Truth Warrior. Hey, Steve from Van Life on the Road, currently in South Carolina. Thank you for checking in. I assume that means that you are on the road, that you might be someplace else next week. That's pretty cool. David Sanderson, this is the only YouTube channel I won't troll the live chat because I respect Steve so much. Thank you. We actually do have a pretty well-behaved group of people usually in the chat, and I appreciate that. I do have the flood control on, so you can only comment once a minute. So I apologize for that, but watch Rich Rebuild channel. Who's the guy looking through the window behind you? I hope you're not talking about that window, because that window is quite high off the ground, but you might be referring to that right there. That's Robbie Robertson of the band, and it is a signed poster of his that I got when I worked at a radio station. It actually played his music. I did not meet him, but that is his signature, so I had it framed. And on the ground next to him is Milo and Wolfie, the dogs that are mentioned in the credits of my videos. Hunter Coleman checking in from Philadelphia, PA, and somebody just asked, by the way, were there any updates about the woodchuck? Anonymous Jester. No, I have not seen a woodchuck anywhere near my property since that night. I'm convinced that woodchucks have got a better network of communications than like the military, because word got out that there's a crazy guy living in that house, and he will chase you at night, and he'll run into bushes after you, and he'll torment you for hours. So tell you what, go bother other people, but stay off his property. I'm sure they're there. I just haven't seen them. But the greatest thing ever is I've got trail cameras. And so I have like an inventory of what wildlife I have on my property passing through, at least. And so I've got your deer, I've got your coyotes I've mentioned before, I've got turkeys. And the other day I saw a raccoon. And I've not actually seen with my own eyes a raccoon on my property in over 4 or 5 years. So they're out there. They're nocturnal. They tend to keep to themselves, and they're very quiet. But I was glad to see one. I've always liked raccoons. So there you go. Johnny Knoxville says, tip your bartender had a CD mature this week. Steve-O. Are you going to cash it in, or are you going to roll it over and let it ride? I'm always standing in line at the bank, and I see that sign there, and it goes, ask about our certificates of deposit. Right now, paying 1.2% if you lock up your money for 6 years. Yeah, okay. Mark my word says the band. Yes, of course, Robbie Robertson was in the band along with a bunch of other cool people. So you had your Leon, you had your Mr. Manuel, you had it was a wonderful organization, the band. And I read Robbie Robertson's autobiography, and he tells the whole story about all the way up to the last waltz, and it was the most amazing thing. So JD says, is it true radio stations only have a 20 to 30 song playlist because of royalties? No, that wouldn't make any sense, because they have to play, they have to pay per play, not which ones they're playing. The 20 to 30 song playlists back in the days of Top 40, ironically, weren't 40 songs. They're often 20 to 30 songs. They did that because a lot of people don't listen to the radio for more than 15, 20 minutes at a time. So you could actually repeat a song once an hour, and some people wouldn't catch it. Now, it would drive the people crazy at work or long commutes, but no. And radio stations have got to pay. I forgot if it's BMI or ASCAP, or it might be both, but they got to pay, airplay royalties for songs they play. So there you go. Lewis Brownings is trying for the record for the most items added to the set. What have you sent me? I apologize. I've gotten some stuff sent me that is so cool, but there's no place to put it. And I feel bad. I wanted to bring it up and put it on camera today, and I left it. But somebody sent me, I'm guessing it's an AI created image of a woodchuck driving a viper. I'll bring it on next week and show it to you. I feel so bad that I've not put it out here. Mrs. Hayes, first name Purple, I assume. Hi, Steve and chat. Hope you don't mind me joking like that. Matt Man, Steve, the case about the woman being baptized to avoid a mere serious charge, was that officer disciplined or should he be? Well, I assume he should be. I can't remember if he was or not. What's sad is I do so many videos these days that somebody mentioned a video to me and they go, oh, yeah, I just did that. Then I went and looked and it was 4 weeks ago. And I'm like, oh, okay. And time just, I can't keep time by when a video was. So, oh, Zach Reese. Hey, Steve, enjoy watching your videos, brother. Blunted Vegas 702. Do you ever think about a completely AI court system who said an attorney needs to be a human? Well, there's a problem, as we've discovered in the legal system with AI. And AI doesn't know the difference between a fantasy and a fact, which I think is an Aldo Nova song. But and so I think if a judge didn't know real cases from fake cases, it would kind of hurt the situation a little bit. Duncan Campbell, Roger Sliney, hello from Melbourne. And I always like it when people check in, especially from Australia or New Zealand. So, Pragmatic Lady, hey, Steve, simply love the channel. Thanks. And I appreciate that. By the way, I got to tell you, my channel right now is still 90% men. 90%. It used to be 95. So we picked up a few of the ladies lately, and I appreciate that. But I've had people go, what, really? Like, but who thinks about this stuff? But I worked in radio for so long, I can't ignore demographics. So, Rick Simon says, hi, Steve, do you do dog bite defense? Michigan 6th Circuit. What about employment law? I don't do dog bite defense. I am in the 6th Circuit because I'm in Michigan, and I do not do employment law. All I do is lemon law. Now, if you're in Michigan and you have a question about an attorney in Michigan, you can always send me a note and say, hey, Steve, I need to hire an attorney. Do you know anybody? And I don't always know an expert in any given field. But I'm here to tell you right now, if you say, Steve, I was in a car accident, when my loved one's in a car accident, I'm going to tell you to call Gersten and Colt now. Steve Gersten's a good friend of mine. I've known the guy for 40 years, and they are excellent. And I know people who do other types of law, business law, things like that, but not always. People say, Steve, you know any good like workman's comp attorneys? And unfortunately, I don't. And that's because not many attorneys do it. And I've never met any recently, so I don't know of any. So I apologize for that. Dexter, do you need 4 separate sets that you can rotate through? I could actually make this thing right here, the wall, the fake wall behind me, put it on a thing that rotates, and it'd be like one of those secret walls in like a spy movie or something. And I could put a completely different thing on it, but the problem is the bookcase is in the way. And the bookcase weighs about 1,000 pounds because of all the books that are in it. Ryan Choate, Steve, do you like pie? It depends on the pie. But I like a basic cherry pie. I love a French silk pie. Oh, apple pie, not so much. I know they always go, yeah, baseball, hot dogs, apple pie, blah. I know it's an all-American thing, but not really. Randy Pabo says, how do we know that a foot or meter objectively is a foot or meter? What do we historically have to calibrate it with? The sun? That's an interesting question, and I recommend you read a book called The Measure of All Things. I forgot who the author is, but he talks about how they came up with the metric system back in the old days. And the original metric system was based on the distance between the North Pole and the equator as measured through France. Then they took that, divided it up, came up with a meter, and based on that, and some of the things are obvious, like, at water freezing at sea level is 0, water boiling at sea level is 100 Celsius. But they now have more accurate ways of doing those things that can be reproduced largely in a laboratory. But yeah, in the old days, if you went to the local county fair to buy a bushel of wheat, you'd discover that a bushel in this town is actually smaller than a bushel in that town. And there were a lot of these common law measurements, like a cord of wood, that there was theoretically some standardization on, but not really. And so it was not uncommon back in the old days where a town would have an official foot or an official meter or whatever it was, and they would attach it to a building. And if you got in an argument, you could go over there and measure it against that, which people had more time back then. They could do that, So nowadays, we haven't got time to go, oh, fine, let's you and I go to City Hall and settle this right now as to which one of these is shorter, So, yeah, it's crazy. Geary Rexwork says you should be getting a box in tomorrow's mail, a couple of books and a couple of XXL shirts. Thank you very much. I look forward to that. And by the way, I don't know if my friend JP is here today. I don't see him in the chat. By the way, the Canadian robot lady will be checking, and she said in a little while. So she can't guarantee it, but she's going to try. But JP sent me a whole pile of shirts, like 12 or 15. And I ran them through. The system is they go in the wash, they get hung up, and then I work them into rotation. And I said, I don't want to just have 12 new shirts in a row and then go back to the old shirts. So I try to mix them in. And so understand that if you send me a shirt, it'll wind up on camera eventually. It might just be just a little bit before it gets there. But I also enjoy books. I love history books. But I got to point out the XXL thing is important. I've had people mail me shirts that were mediums. Okay. I haven't worn a medium since junior high school. And I know people say very nicely, Steve, you don't look that big. Well, number one, I'm tall, but yeah, so proportionally, I wear a double X. Sometimes an XL will fit me, but I'd rather have the loose fitting shirts than the really tight shirts. So there you go. Locked On Law says Bureau of Weights and Measures has entered the chat. Thank you very much. Let me know if you're familiar with the book, The Measure of All Things. And then let me know if you've seen the recent Saturday Night Live skit where George Washington visits his troops the night before a big battle. And he says, gentlemen, sit down, save your energy. This battle tomorrow is important because we're all fighting for the same thing. We want the right to run our own government and to self-rule and to be able to choose our own weights and measures. He goes off on this tangent about how he wants us to be using feet, yards, and miles. And these men are asking, like, dude, how many feet in a yard? 3. How many yards in a mile? No one knows. It's very funny. Just trust me on that. So look that up specifically. George Washington on SNL talking about weights and measures. Johnny Knoxville is going to spend my day measuring cords of wood. And the question is, are we talking a face cord or a full cord? Because as my memory serves, and it frankly lately doesn't serve very well, but as my memory serves, a face cord was a certain area. It was stacked to a certain depth, but a full cord was double that. And so there's a lot of confusion as to what a cord of wood actually is. And of course, you stack wood that's been quartered and it doesn't stack perfectly well. So, there's a problem there as well. Zivan Rostov says, are hot dogs sandwiches? And see, I believe they are because there's bread on both sides of a central meat. Of course, it's not stacked where the things are parallel, perpendicular to the ground. And so I don't know if the center of gravity matters as much on the definition of a sandwich as it could. But Joel Raleigh says, if a taco is a sandwich, a hot dog has to be a sandwich. Oh, yeah. And I had people saying, well, in that case, ice cream is soup. I mean, don't forget, there was an administration not too long ago that said if there's ketchup in a lunch, that would count as the vegetables for a kid to have at school. So Cracker Jack says, hey, Steve is live. At first, I thought it was Steve is alive. And I'm like, whoa, you know something I don't know? Randall Munson, is there a criteria for T-shirts worn on your show? Well, here's the thing. If it's a place or a school, I will wear it. I don't care. If it's a real place, I'll wear it. So if you found me a shirt that said Hell, Michigan, I'd wear it, even though it has HE double hockey sticks on it. But it's a real place. That's fine. If it's a school, a legitimate school, I will also wear it as well. Now, I don't want anything political or religious. Those are the two topics I don't talk about on the show for the most part. So I don't want T-shirts that say, I can picture things that people could put on a shirt where I wouldn't survive the video. So I prefer place names. Businesses are fine as long as there's nothing obscene about it. Wild Bill 50 cents says a face cord is actually 1/3 of a cord. Okay, so that means, so in other words, the face cord is the front one pile, then there's a second pile and a third pile behind it. Okay, I knew there was more than one pile. Retired Butcher Boy says, thank you, Steve. I saved $100,000 by not buying an RV. I think we all have, except for the few people who are like, ooh, I bought one. Chuck Whitehead, can you ask for a police report if you're buying a car? You mean it was used in a crime or stolen or what? Daniel Kester says ketchup is also a sauce. Yeah, in large enough quantities, it would also be a drink, I suppose. And then Randall Muntz says the cord is 48 inches by 48 inches by 96 inches. Ginger Cat says Intercourse, Pennsylvania. That's one of them. There's more. There's there's more. Mark Miller. Sup, Steve. Happy Sunday. Sup, Mark. Appreciate that. Scutag says, is a sub a sandwich then? It too has one hinged side, and hot dog buns fail. If the hinge fails, does that make a hot dog a sandwich? Well, see, submarine sandwiches, though, even though they're hinged, they do tend to put them together and you eat it that way. But you don't normally eat it this way. See, and that's where in my mind, we have to look at this on all axes, okay? And the submarine sandwich is eaten with the stuff in the middle parallel to the ground. And then the hot dog is rotated 90 degrees. But again, it's really all just custom. Oh. Ben Leach, hey, Steve, got the book. Thank you. You're welcome, my friend. Thank you for ordering it. Yes, Cleverich says they try to make ketchup a vegetable for school meals. Yes, and that's what I'm referring to. And of course, you could say, well, then wouldn't it be a fruit? It's probably not made out of anything that's vegetable or fruit. It's probably a petroleum byproduct at that point. Michael Sorum comes to Steve. It's tangent time. Please tell us about an interesting lemon law story. Hold on. It jumped on me. Oh, about an interesting lemon law case. See, to me, they're all interesting on some level. But then on some level, they all kind of blend together. But I told a bunch of them on VinWiki. If you look up Ed Bolian's channel, VinWiki, look up Lehto and the Lemon Law. And I told my 4 or 5 favorite stories, including the guy who had the Dodge Daytona, the one that was built in the late 80s or early 90s. And it went through 6 or 7 engine blocks. And it wasn't the engine blocks. But the dealership just stupidly said, well, your engine block is correct. We'll give you a new engine block. Okay. Joe B, thank you very much, my friend, for checking in and highlighting your comment because you give me the big thumbs up. I appreciate that. Locked On Law says a submarine sandwich should only be available on a submarine. And that's interesting. You know, submarine sandwiches are kind of like pancakes and that there's a bunch of different regional designations. So it can be a submarine sandwich or a hoagie or whatever. And likewise, pancakes, griddle cakes, flapjacks. Again, these are all just regional things. So Wild Bill 57 says, thanks to McDonald's price hikes, I've saved thousands. You probably also put yours on your life. Tank O Military says there's also Climax and Fertile, Minnesota. There's a Climax, Michigan also. Holland Zamum, upside down. What are you asking? If you eat a hot dog upside down, what does it become then? Chuck Puck, how about a corn dog? What is a corn dog? Is an actual hot dog that's like deep fried or something? I've never had one. There are actually some things, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, that I haven't eaten because I didn't understand them. I've been to county fairs. I've seen corn dogs, and I don't know what they are. And I've never been with anybody who ate one, and I'm just scared to say, excuse me, what is that you're eating? Tell me about it. Chris Sinclair, VinWiki is such an underrated channel. Don't care how many subscribers it has. Well, he's got millions of subscribers, so it's rated pretty well. But I agree with you, and Ed Bolian, the host of that channel, is just the nicest guy. He's one of these guys who on camera comes across as nice and friendly, and in real life, really nice and friendly also. It's the same thing. I hung out with him for a whole day while we shot 11 videos, and I am going to go back down there one of these days. I hadn't had a chance. We've talked about it. I might combine it with a trip to go visit my other friend, Sam Crack. Johnny Knoxville says I could really go for a quality corn dog. Now, that's the thing. What's the difference between a good corn dog and a bad corn dog? Like, do carnies actually have standards? Like, are there actually, like, do they actually pay attention to that? I like to tell the story, and it's absolutely true. My brother went to a county fair up near Traverse City, out in the middle of nowhere, and there's this one of those little trailers that got pulled in that sells food of some sort, and they're selling elephant ears. And I think it's a big doughy thing that they fry and you eat it. It's like eating a big piece of bread kind of, but I think it's sprinkled with sugar or something to make it palatable to the people who hang out at those places. And my brother was in line and a woman got in front of him, and she's like, "Okay, can you tell me about are the elephant ears gluten free? Can you make them gluten free? Okay, well, hold on a second. How many grams of fat?" And she starts asking these questions that my brother's like, I don't think anybody knows the answers, but the teenager behind the counter doesn't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. She's like, well, hold on a second. I'm going to order. I just need to know, is there riboflavin in the elephant ear? My brother's like, I wanted to punch this person. Oh boy. Bob blah blah. Thanks for checking in, my friend. I appreciate it. I was looking for the Finnish flag, so now it's your icon here. A corn dog is a hot dog wrapped in cornbread. But isn't it like cooked in it or deep fried in it or something on a stick? I don't know why, but food on sticks is never really. I mean, a shish kebab, but you take it off the sticks before you eat it. When I think to myself, I'm walking around a county fair eating food off a stick. It's kind of like in The Jerk when Steve Martin goes, "This is the best pizza in a cup I've ever had." Lorraine Francis V says, "Can a business previously owned by George Barris be considered a cultural landmark?" In my opinion, yes. By law, I'm not sure. I've met George Barris. He's passed away now, but of course, George Barris is a famous car customizer, very, very well known in the industry. Really, really nice guy, and also remarkably short. I have a picture with him standing next to me, and he's about this tall, but one of the greatest guys who ever lived. I met him at a car show in Ohio back around 2008 or 9, and maybe 10, and talked to him for a long time. And just a heck of a nice guy. And but there's a big debate about that because some places, some states, and some cities will say, well, if this building is a cultural landmark, we're going to designate it such, and then you can't tear it down. You can't. And I mean, I know people who bought a home and were told you can't modify it because it's a cultural landmark. And like, we just bought a house, we want to put a new roof on it. Well, we might let you put the new roof on it, but you have to show us the plans and let us approve them. And suddenly there's somebody else involved in your remodeling job. And so I am a big believer in property rights. And I think that if you buy a piece of property, it should be up to you what you do with it. But I also do understand the people who are like, but you know something, that building that's been there for 400 years, maybe we should preserve it. But the question is, how do you do that? Do you pass a law that says that person can't do anything with it? Or does somebody get together and say, hey, let's raise the money and buy it from them? And that might do it. But I don't know. Is there a struggle right now going on over a George Barris property? I'm curious. I mentioned George Barris to somebody. They go, you met Chuck Barris? I said, no, George. They go, what's the difference? I go, well, Chuck Barris was the host of the Gong Show. George Barris was a car customizer. Scott Y. Hi, Steve from Laredo, Texas. Thank you for checking in. Glenn Combs says a good corn dog is made with Nathan's or Hebrew National Dogs. Daniel Kester says, Steve, I'm sure you are familiar with who Sam Clemens was. Well, yeah, of course. He was a writer who went by a pen name. Mr. Twain, I believe. Doug Wallace, I always wanted to try that pizza in a cup. You know, I'm curious to know if it really exists, because I remember seeing the joke in the movie. I saw that movie at the theater when it came out. And I remember hearing that going, I wonder if they really have that, or is that purposely something that doesn't make any sense? Zebra ZXX checking in and with the thumbs up. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yora Tavio says this has been a sunny day in Finland too at 75F. That's nice. That's nice. Chris Sinclair says Marilyn Monroe's house must be saved. I'm curious, which house was it? It's not the house she passed away in, though, is it? It was like a house she lived in at one point in time. Because the question always is, like, you know, for a while there's a big brouhaha here in Michigan because the home that Eminem grew up in was up for sale. And without that connection, it wasn't worth much. With that connection, I'm not sure it was worth much more because where it was. But that was a big deal at the time. Johnny Knoxville says there's a guy in my hometown who put a 76 ball sign in his driveway, and the neighbor complained that she had to look at it while doing the dishes. Town made him remove it as an eyesore. I'm assuming you're talking about the Union 76 ball that used to be at the gas stations, probably orange. And you know, that happens too. So David Davis says, hey, Steve, I just saw last week's episode talking about the live stream, and I can tell you the technical difference between boats and ships. When making a turn, boats will lean into the turn, ships will lean out. So you're saying it's basically size and draft? Could be. I don't know. Jerry C says, if I remember correctly, the unknown comic was on the Gong Show and wasn't funny at all to me. No, but you got to remember one thing. In an age at that time was like there was a lot of comedians getting on television, and a lot of them weren't that funny. And along comes this guy with a bag over his head telling stupid jokes, and it was kind of funny because of that. And later on, he tried taking the bag off and tried to be like the previously known as or formerly known as, and it didn't quite work because he wasn't that funny. But yeah, the unknown comic. A little known fact: Oingo Boingo appeared on the Gong Show with a much longer name on the group. It was like the Mystical Knights of the Oingo Boingo. I don't remember if they got gonged or not. Doesn't really matter, as Danny Elfman and company went along to great success. But they were actually on the Gong Show. America's Got Talent is basically the modern Gong Show. It really is. In fact, I'm surprised it didn't just come out and just say, look, what is it called? The Gong Show. Lewis Browning says pizza in a cup could be a quiche. Epsilon Nebula, you ever listen to YLE Radio, Suomi? I've heard it's very popular in Finland. I never have. No, I'm familiar with YLE, and I've read articles they post on the internet, the ones that are in English. But no, I've never listened to them. Easy one says you put a boat on a ship, but you can't put a ship on a boat. That's the one I've always heard. But again, I think it's more of a matter of usage and custom. And are we talking about being in the Navy? Are we talking about working in a shipyard? Are we talking about Boy Scouts camping? I don't know. Kevin's checking in from St. Charles, Michigan. Thank you for checking in, my friend. St. Charles, Michigan. Mean Gene, the Dancing Machine. Ben Leach reminds us, of course. And many people have kind of not thought about this. Originally, the Gong Show had a host. Was it Gary Burbank? And he came out and did the host thing, like he's hosting like the Grammys or something. And then they got rid of him, and Chuck Barris himself hosted it. And he was goofy, and he didn't actually belong on camera, but that was part of the joke. And if they had like 60 seconds to kill at the end of the show, this guy would I think he was a janitor or something. At least he pretended he was. He would just come out and just dance. And yeah, Mean Gene, the Dancing Machine. The whole show is so irreverent that it kind of worked. Wizard of Whoopi, greetings from West Virginia, Hillbilly Mopar and the Moonshine Guy, and Outlaw, who keeps my lawyer busy at times. Okay. Twin Turbo Toyota says, it's a dead man's party. Who could ask for more? That, of course, is a line from their one big song that was probably their biggest hit, other than Weird Science, which charted because it was in that movie. But Weird Science is not their best song. Dead Man's Party is like the theme song to California. I remember when I went to Los Angeles to go to law school, you could flip around the dial and hear that song on almost any station. Top 40 played it, AC played it, Middle of the Road played it, Album Rock. Everyone played Dead Man's Party at one time or another. And it's a great, great song. I love several albums by Oingo Boingo. I've got a bunch of their stuff. K-Rock used to play tons of it, KROQ. And of course, the band broke up a while back. Danny Elfman is still alive and well, making music for television and movie soundtracks. And of course, the one you are familiar with is the theme to The Simpsons. And that one song has probably made him $1 trillion. So Chrissy Avalon's checking in from rural Ohio. Thank you, my friends. And don't forget, of course, Chuck Barris did claim to be a CIA agent the entire time. And it's the dumbest concept ever, but they made a movie out of it because somebody thought it was funny. But it's like, it's just kind of stupid. But Katie, hi, Steve, dropping in to say hello. Enjoy the day. You too, my friend. I appreciate that. Cheryl Lynn was the only guest I remember from the Gong Show. Do you remember they used to bring on judges, some of whom were celebrity judges. And I remember one episode where the Starland vocal band, the entire band was a judge. So they had all of them sitting in one spot. And then somebody would come out and sing. And like a serious person trying to sing to break into the business. And then some guy would come out and play a chainsaw or something. So Big D's Home said, Mr. Lehto, you're by far my most favorite YouTuber to watch. No fancy clickbait. Just speak your mind. Greetings from foothills of Eastern Kentucky. I appreciate that. And I have to tell you, and as a YouTube creator, you just have to trust me. I get emails every single day, people pitching me all kinds of stuff for my channel because I'm popping up on people's radar now. And I get these emails from guys that go, hey, Steve, as you know, your thumbnails suck. I make thumbnails professionally. Here's some of my work. And if you hire me, I can make your thumbnails work for you. And it's like, my thumbnails do work. They work exactly as I want them to. And then I go and look at the samples of what the guy has, and it's all this stuff where it's like, you won't believe what this cop did. And, my version of it is the police can now force you to unlock your phone according to the Ninth Circuit. And mine's not clickbait. That is, I won't do that. And by the way, I think those all look alike. So right now, if you scan all of the thumbnails on a big desktop computer, mine stands out because it's not like that. So GLC, do you know where Empire, Michigan is? Of course, you're up near the Traverse City area ish. I love that whole area up there. My brother lives in near Grawn, not far from Chum's Corners. There, I know where you are. Original Momo says Dead Man's Party is still the jam. Oh, it rocks. It rocks. Matthew Sholstrom says, Stephen, think I'm becoming you. I've now gone to eat 4 times today and just keep on getting sidetracked and have yet to actually get food. That's the thing. I know people who are like, oh, it's noon, time for food. Like Rain Man with Wapner. And no, I'll be working and I look down, it's 2:00. What happened to lunch? So that's one of the reasons, and I don't want to turn this into an ad for Factor, but it's one of the reasons I like Factor is if I think, oh, I like to eat right now, I haven't got the time. Yeah, I've got 2 minutes. So Adrian Denson says, how often do you do live? I try to do them once a week. Usually Sundays. Last week, I think it is Saturday because Mother's Day. Was that last weekend? But I try to do them on Sundays, 1:00. I move them around a little tiny bit, but generally that's it. Cracker Jack, what's the actual email we should send stories to? It is steve@lehtoslaw.com. I hate to type while I'm talking, but steve@lehtoslaw.com. And of course, some people who read that say it's steve@lehtoslaw.com. So, but yeah, Lehto's Law. I've had the URL lehtoslaw.com for a long, long time. So, Jason Simons' question, are you really an American citizen if you do not have access to banking and insurance because you do not have a street address? People like myself living in a vehicle or RV. Well, you are a U.S. citizen if you're born here, and that doesn't get taken away from you the moment. Like let's talk about a homeless person, okay? Homeless people are still U.S. citizens if they were before they were homeless. So the more important question is there are things for which you need an address. And I know people who've said, well, that's a real problem because if I travel all over, how do I get an address? And you got to make a decision about that because you can get a PO box, or you could maybe have somebody let you use their address or something, as long as you're not doing it deceptively and so on. But the point is that there are obviously, like, to get a driver's license, they're going to say, what's your address? And they're going to say, because we want to put that on there. You can't say it. None address, none. So, but you still are a U.S. citizen. Somebody just asked and said that there is a problem sometimes with the time, the video length covering the bottom right of the text on the thumbnail. Yeah, I probably fix it by just lifting the stuff up a little higher because I used to always think it should be balanced with the words across the bottom. So like maybe the bottom third, maybe I'll raise it up and play with that. But I appreciate that. Adrian Denson, I miss a lot of things, but I don't miss lunch. It reminds me of Michael Faraday, one of the early experimenters in electricity from England. And he did a lot of experiments when they didn't know a lot about electricity. But at one point in time, they were playing with the conductivity of mercury. And mercury as an element is a fascinating concept, but it's also very, very dangerous if you catch the fumes of mercury. And you can actually get brain damage from it, which, of course, is where the phrase Mad Hatter comes from, because a lot of guys who are hat makers use mercury for something. I don't even know what it was. And so Michael Faraday, in the later stages of his life, started losing some of his memory. And he wrote a letter to a very, very dear friend of his. and he's talking about how he was losing some of his memories. And he said he signed off by saying, "I forget many things, but I will not forget you." And he signed it. So there you go. That's a touching moment for today. Spike Love, where I grew up, lunch could be dinner, but supper is supper. GLC, can you get a driver's license from 2 different states? Many states, and I believe most states, don't allow that. In fact, I know that many states, if you go there and you say, I'd like to get a license, they go, were you licensed previously? And you say yes, and you give it to them, and then they give you a new license. But I think I think it's actually not something that's doable, but I haven't looked into that. See, that's the thing, is I can come on here for 5 minutes, or in this case, 38 minutes, and people will ask questions I haven't really thought about in a while. So, Matthew Showstrom says, I'm now finally microwaving a Hot Pocket 7 hours after I initially woke up. Now, see, that's where you could use a comma, because you could say I'm microwaving a Hot Pocket, comma, 7 hours after I initially woke up. But instead, you could be microwaving a Hot Pocket for 7 hours after you initially woke up. And I think that would kill you. If you microwave the Hot Pocket for 7 hours, it would be hotter than the center of the sun. So, Janice Ellery says, I think there's more than only 5% females here. Oh, the population of the room, which by the way is 500 people in it right now, is probably skewed a little differently. But I just know that of viewers on my channel, YouTube makes all kinds of statistics and data and demographic information available to creators, and I can look at it. I can see like how many of my viewers are in America versus elsewhere. How many of them are male versus female? How many are in this group versus that group of age? And so I can tell you that the prototypical viewer is my age, and he's a guy. The most common group is males my age. So the Prodigal Stranger says, don't fear the Oxford comma. Well, actually wrote coma, which I think could be different, the Oxford coma. Tom Dave 42, if you're from out of state and you don't have a mailbox at your residence, it is extremely hard to, I'm sure it is. And that's why I've known of people, for instance, that, if they can't do anything else, they go with their parents or a sibling and just say, hey, I'll stay here once in a while and we'll just call this my residence because this is where I get my mail. So Douglas Howe says that the ship that crashed into the Key Bridge in Baltimore is supposed to be moved tomorrow. That's fascinating. I did not hear that yet, but my understanding is there's still people on board that ship who've been there the entire time. If that's true, that'd be shocking. Chrissy Avalon, are you an attorney full time? Yes, I am. I'm also an author. Remind me. But my videos don't take as much time to make as you might think. These live streams take 2 hours because it's 2 real hours. But my videos, which are 10 minutes, 12 minutes long, take like 15 to 20 minutes each to make. I get up in the morning, knock those out, and I get the rest of the day to actually do work. I got an email from a guy, and I honestly thought he was joking. I thought he was joking. He sent me a note last week and said, Steve, I heard you on a podcast. And he's talking about the 99% Invisible podcast I was on. And he said, and they mentioned that you wrote a book. I didn't know you wrote a book. He goes, so I looked it up, and sure enough, there's your book, The Great American Jetpack, on Amazon. How come you've never told anybody that you've written a book? And I said, and he also said, he goes, I've seen every video you ever made. And so I wrote him back and said, are you joking? Or are you serious? He's, I'm serious. Why? I go, I've written 15 books. I mention it every time I turn around. And last month, I sold 600 of them to viewers. Didn't you see that video? And he goes, no, I didn't see it. I said, okay, well, unfortunately, I think you need to go back and watch some more of it. Because I mention it from time to time. But I'm not going to come on here and beat on it. Go, hey, I got a book for sale. I got a book for sale. I got a book for sale. I've told people, if you want to see my books, go to Amazon, run my name. Or, I've wrote the books about Turbine Car, Tucker, the Wing Cars, and then Douglas Houghton, Timothy Masters, that kind of thing. I've written a whole bunch of books, but the guy goes, how come you've never told anyone? Duncan Campbell says the crew of the Dolly isn't allowed to leave as the ship is still running its engines for power. But the entire crew's got to stay on board, or couldn't they leave a skeleton crew on board? Oh, and by the way, if you pay very close attention to the books behind me, I've added a couple books in the last few months, and 2 I added about the Titanic, and I read 2 very, very good books about the Titanic sinking, and in them, one of the author pointed out something I didn't really ever stop to think about, and that is, they always say the captain goes down with the ship, and you might wonder, why would that be? I mean, is that literally part of his job description? It's like, by the way, you're signing up to pay you really well, but you might die if the ship sinks. And what's funny is the guy in the book points out there's a legal reason for it. And the fact that I misread something. I thought I was going to have to run. The fact that the captain goes down with the ship is for legal purposes. Because if the captain abandons the ship, then the ship is deemed abandoned. And that changes the rules on salvage. So if the captain stays on board the ship and somebody comes along and goes, we can help you right now, a different proportion goes to the salvager than if the captain jumped overboard and abandoned the ship. And so they've basically said that the distinction is that until that ship is literally underwater and the captain's ankle deep in water, he stays on that ship just in case. Spike Love, I didn't know you're a lawyer, Steve. Oh, boy. Just Noah says he spoke of a man moving his house 12 feet. There's a video on YouTube, and the house is huge. Really? I had not guessed it would be that large because he referred to it as a like a temporary cabin or something. But again, I didn't see it, so I don't know. Thank you. Cold Lake Alta says you have 3 books in the library in my town of 10,000 in southern Ontario. Ontario, Canada? Or Ontario, California? Oh. Locked on loss of the captain of the Titanic was on his final voyage before retirement. Oh, there's all kinds of interesting stuff happening aboard the Titanic. But yeah, I'm not going to get into it. Like I said, I just read 2 very good books on it. So Chris Sinclair, did you get threats over the Italian Hall disaster book? People or politicians? I got a lot of flack and a lot of negative. I don't want to say threats or anything, but I've had people show up at my talks and heckle me, like screaming and yelling at me. There was a professor from Michigan Tech who was either drunk or insane, possibly both, get hauled out by security because he wanted to argue with me about it. And like, I'm on the agenda, dude. You're not. Leave. So it's unfortunate that 73 people can die. And a guy is trying to make sure we don't forget that event. And people will come and yell at him, hoping he'll go away. And if you know me by now, which I think you should, I ain't going away. Maz says Ontario, Oregon. Okay, glad I asked because I was thinking Ontario, California, Ontario, Canada. So yeah, Old Paint 71 says once the last person leaves the ship, any salvage company that gets a line over the vessel can claim no cure, no pay salvage rights. And the captain, of course, would be symbolic of that. Because if the captain jumped overboard, but like some poor cook was still on board. I'll tell you one of the things in the story of the Titanic, all kinds of crazy stuff was going on, and they couldn't fit it all in that documentary with Leonardo DiCaprio. So you got to read one of these books, and the book I read is called Unsinkable. I forgot the author's name, but somebody can look it up. It's very good. And there were a group of, I believe, Italian people who worked in the kitchen. And when the accident first took place, when they hit the iceberg, they rounded them up and put them downstairs and locked them in their cabins. And nobody ever bothered to go down and get them out. True story. True story. So, Mark Miller was a professor, a flat earther, too. Alex K, a lot of other forbid a Toyota, but I was talking about something completely different in a different context 5 years ago, maybe 6. But I've only owned American cars, and I've had good luck with them. So when somebody goes, hey, I heard you got an Explorer. Are you a sucker for punishment? I go, oh, I've owned 5 Explorers with nothing but routine maintenance. Why am I a sucker now? Because they're junk. Well, let's see. I get 100,000 miles out of them at a minimum. Had one go to 237. I've never replaced a starter on an Explorer. The starter motors are always there. Like, what? Yeah, so I'm not going to go, Consumer Reports says, you know something? I'm going to go off what I actually know to be true with my own experiences. And if you've had great experiences, knock yourself out. For all I know, you may have bought a Yugo, and it may be the greatest car you've ever owned. And if you said, Steve, this Yugo treats me well, I'd go, oh, okay, great. I would go, hey, you're a sucker. You bought a Yugo. So it jumped around again. Marsha Brown says the crew on board the ship that hit the bridge do not have current visas. And that's often the problem, is that these people on these boats who are manning the boats, because they come into a harbor, might not get off the boat and they might head back out again. So they might not need a visa. So when they have a problem like this, I mean, I seem to recall, wasn't the Suez Canal boat that was lodged in there like a chicken bone? Wasn't there at least somebody on board that ship who couldn't leave, and pretty much for the same reason? That may have been totally different. I don't know. 10X Bull says Jenny Walsh, Unsinkable. The book is called Unsinkable, but I forgot the author's name. Chuck Whitehead, what do you do if a client doesn't pay your fee on a settlement? It's never happened to me because the settlement funds usually get sent to me. I put them in my trust account with my client's permission and say, I'll then cut you a check for yours. I'm going to cut myself a check for mine. I've never had a client argue with me about that. And I've been practicing law now for 33 years in September. So Johnny James, my Ford Ranger got to 310,000 kilometers. You have to do the conversion on that to mileage. Earthbound Misfit in 2009, I parked a 95 Explorer with 386,000 miles. Probably has the original starter in it too. One thing people don't understand is I have a brother who worked at Ford Truck. And because of that, I could get a plan, which means I get a really good price. And I don't have to haggle with a salesperson at a dealership. Trust me, that's worth a lot of money. And so Ford Explorers were also built and designed by the truck division of Ford, not cars. And so they're built to truck standards. And so that's why they've got these things like, starters that last 300,000 miles and so on. But, Ford Focuses and the ones with the dual clutch transmissions and so on, yeah, it's a nightmare. But I can also tell you some nightmares about some other car companies. And everyone does that. They'll go, well, this car company made this one car. Oh, okay, a car 10 years ago and whatever. So I work off of my own experiences there. G. Miller, hi, Steve. Big fan. Love your take on legal stories. Thanks for your perspective. Thank you very much. Randall Munson, where's my Elio? You're referring, of course, that three-wheeled vehicle some guy claims to be building down south someplace. I don't know about that. Juan Peralta, Steve, what triggered the need for the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act to be enacted? Why should manufacturing allow third-party or self-work on warranted items? Well, you have to understand that, and that's a great question. The Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act is a federal statute, got passed in the 1970s. And that's not all it does. It does a whole bunch of stuff. And so what it does is it talks about warranties in consumer settings and basic standards for that. So there was a time in the 1960s where somebody would say, I'm going to sell you this widget and it comes with a full warranty. And so you buy it and it breaks and you bring it back and go, hey, this thing broke. It's got a full warranty. I go, yeah, pay me $10 and I'll fix it. Where'd that come from? It's part of my full warranty. So the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act says, if you're going to call it a full warranty, it's got to do these things. Otherwise, you must call it a limited warranty. That's the first thing Mag-Moss did, was straighten out warranty language. But then they also were addressing the fact that a lot of companies would say, hey, by the way, if you buy my widget and you use some other company's refills, we're going to cancel your warranty. And of course, I'm talking about toner companies and printer companies. And Magnuson-Moss didn't say that you have to let other manufacturers mess with your stuff. It said if you forbid it or restrict it, you have to have a reason why. And so if you can show that these parts made by somebody else aren't as good, then you can say, yes, if you use those substandard parts, it'll avoid your warranty. You're a limited warranty because nobody offers full warranties anymore. Not a banned account asks, will auto jobs return to the U.S.? Or are they gone for good? It's interesting. The auto industry is funny because there was a time, and I know people who lived during this time, where you could walk into a factory in Saginaw or Flint or Detroit, walk in and say, I want a job. And they go, fill this out. You're hired. Go over there. And I knew a guy who was working during that time where he said that every single day there'd be new hires showing up and they tell him, find them work to do to tide them over until we find a good place for them. They were hiring everybody who could walk in the door because that's what they were doing. But, General Motors had 75% market share. Ford and Chrysler had the other 74%, and 1% was some, foreign car company. And I'm exaggerating the numbers for effect. Sorry. And so the times have changed, obviously. And so, number one, they've automated a lot of processes. Robots can do a lot of this stuff. And so then instead of having a bunch of people on an assembly line, you got like 2 people supervising a line of robots. And then, of course, a lot of stuff did get shipped overseas, and the labor there is cheaper, and that probably ain't coming back. And so I think there will always be a place for workers. There might not be as many places for those workers, but, the companies are large. The products they make are necessary. So the business will be around for a while. But I wouldn't raise children today and say, boy or girl, when you grow up, you can just walk down the street, walk in that door there and ask for a job and you'll get it. And then you'll be secure for the rest of your working life. Those days are so long gone. And that's it's unfortunate because it's nice that there was always work available. People wanted to work, good paying work, but times change. Not a banned account also asked, are there legal protections when losing jobs to AI? Not that I'm aware of, but we'll see. Janice Allery says some warranties want you to send the product to their factory and the freight or postage is more than the item is worth. That's even a common problem. Like, let's suppose you bought a lawn tractor or a riding mower, or as some people say, a ride-on mower, and you bring it home and you're using it for a while and it dies on you. Do you have a trailer? If not, you call the dealership, go, hey, my thing broke down. It's under warranty. They go, bring it to us. I can't. Well, we can come pick it up and bring it back, but they might charge you for that. And that happens. So those things happen. Locked on Law says these weird battery-powered toy cars are hurting the traditional car market. I think right now that what really is going to happen is hybrids are going to come in more so than they were. And when General Motors first built the Chevy Volt with a V, not a B, V, I thought, what a great idea. A car that you can put gasoline in and you can plug it in and you'll never get stranded as long as you've got gasoline, and then they just shifted almost immediately to, not immediately, but to all electrics. And people are buying them, but then you always have that range anxiety problem. And I don't want to stop halfway up north for hours while my car recharges. But a hybrid would allow that. And so I think there's going to be a transitional period where people buy hybrids, and then as they build out the infrastructure for the electric chargers, I think that'll come in more so. But Ad Libitor, what's the oddest case you've taken as a lawyer? It's funny. I got a couple stories of cases I didn't take. I wish I could tell, but I can't. But the only thing I really say is odd is I used to, as a joke almost, take almost any case for a defective product if I'd never handled that type of product before. So I represented people who bought cars, trucks, RVs, snowmobiles, personal watercraft. And one day a woman called me up and goes, I've got a defective sewing machine. And I'm like, come on down. And it was an extremely expensive, elaborate, computer-controlled sewing machine that didn't quite have the capabilities it ought to have for that time. And so we filed the lawsuit, and I got them to buy it back. They bought back a sewing machine. So I got to add that to the resume. So when I started going cars, trucks, RVs, personal water, and sewing machines, and it was cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else weirder than that. But I think the sewing machine was the strangest thing I represented somebody on for a defective product. Not a banned account says, why don't new cars last long like my Chevy Nova? I assume you're referring to the Chevy Nova from, like, say, the 70s. And everybody I know owned one. My brother had one. Three of my brothers owned Chevy Novas. It was just a simple car. The Chevy Nova is just the prototypical simple car where front engine, rear wheel drive is available to a variety of engines, engine compartment this wide. You get a small block and you get something smaller in it. You could shoehorn in a big block or buy a Yenko Nova. But they were inexpensive cars. They were cheap. But then again, think about this. There was no navigation system, no infotainment system. There was no airbags. There was no anti-lock brakes. There was no traction control, no stability control, none of that. It was, and I mean, you could go to a junkyard today, and find a Nova and haul it out and get it running with other parts you found in that junkyard, guaranteed. Like if you said, Steve, is a challenge, we're going to film you and your brothers. You go do that. We could do that. Absolutely. Guaranteed. But it's a very simple car in many respects. Some people thought they were ugly, but Michael Krause's sewing machines can cost several thousand. This one did, and this is a little while ago. So Dennis Berman salutes the Chevy Malibu going away, and that's a nameplate's been around a long, long time. And every now and then they kill one off, and you're like, oh, that's too bad. They can bring it back, but they'll probably bring it back and put it on something weird. So Daniel Kester, I drove a 77 Nova as a taxi. I'm not sure there's a kind of a botched word there. I apologize. Just Noah, is Michigan a safe state to visit? I'd like to visit several genealogical societies for help with my family tree. I live here, unless that scares you. Depends on where you're going. If you're going to go look at records, like say in the Detroit Public Library, I mean, it's in Detroit, but it's also in an extremely safe area. It's across the street from the DIA. It's next door to the Historical Society, and it's got one of the nicest archives I've ever dealt with. And so that's not bad. And so it depends on where you're going to go. But I think Michigan is as safe as any other state out there. So Alvin says, we had a 69 Nova, great car, but horrible crash protection. Well, it probably had a lap belt that nobody wore. And as Jay Leno jokingly says about those cars from back then, all kinds of jagged cast iron things sticking out of the dashboard at you. So when you get in an accident and you hit that stuff, they just hose it off and you keep driving. Second Horizon says, fellow attorney here, Steve, I like your verve and tenacity. Thank you. Not my Verve Pipe. That's a band, but my verve and tenacity. And there's also a Tenacity Brewing Company in Flint. So just pops into my head that way. Michael Krause, do you think that stripped down Toyota truck will ever hit the U.S. market? I'm fascinated by that because I've had that discussion with many people about, you go into a car dealership today and go, here's a nice big truck on the showroom floor. Let's go take a look at it. It's like $95,000. It's got an air-conditioned cargo holder in the back. It's got a glove warmer in the glove box. It's got like DVD players in the back of the headrest. And so we've joked about this. Why doesn't somebody just build a truck that's crank windows, no radio, no air conditioning, like not even available, just a basic truck? And so apparently they've pitched one they're building for other markets. The question is, could they get it to America? And it would have to still pass crash standards. And I think at that point you need to have airbags, things like that. Well, I think those prices have come down, but I still think they could do it. Angels Don't Fall is good to see you live. Steve, thank you very much, my friend. Reminds me of the song by the Psychedelic Furs, Angels Don't Cry. Another story altogether. Mindbend says, downriver from Detroit is okay. I live in Southgate. So Rick Simon says, I'm a trucker. Parked my bobtail at a Walmart overnight in Charlotte with permission. Got a $3,000 boot at 12:30 in the morning. Called the police. They would not help. That is a crying shame. And here's the problem, is that places like that sometimes allow it, sometimes they don't. There's probably some mix-up in communication. or there's just some guy who's told them, hey, I'll boot trucks for you and we'll make it a $3,000 boot and we'll split it. And of course, the fact that you had permission and they did that means that arguably you could sue them for that. But then do you really want to get involved in a, protracted litigation and, 2 years from now be litigating this down the road? But what a nightmare. I feel so sorry. I'm sorry to hear that, my friend. Michael Krause, I miss my old Toyota T100 with crank windows and a stick shift. Oh, Maker Mike, good day to you, sir, and hello to the chat. Thank you for checking, my friend. Steve Schritz says, I've heard about the Charlotte Walmart. Really? Second arises to cut my legal teeth contesting garbage dumping fines. I've met so many attorneys who say somehow I got involved in this one case. Word got out. Next thing I know, everybody's calling me, and they're good cases and they pay. And okay, and if it works for you, it works for you. So there's a need. But if you set out and said, I'm gonna make a career out of that, or I'm gonna make a niche out of that, you couldn't advertise for. How'd you find the clients? So it's word of mouth. So, Angels Don't Fall says backup cams are mandatory now, even on bare minimum new cars and trucks. I went for a ride yesterday in my Cobra. My Cobra's got two mirrors, one side mirror over here and a small one in the dash in the center, kind of like an old Corvette. And I don't have great view around me. So I've got to turn my head and look to make sure there's nobody in my blind spot back here. And if they are, I just step on it and go around them. But I also have a fairly new Explorer, which has got a gigantic mirror, and a gigantic mirror. And it's got the side sensors to let you know there's somebody there. And it's got a backup camera. And when I go between cars like that, or I actually have a 2002 Ford Explorer that's got no backup, nothing on it. It's got mirrors. And I change from vehicle to vehicle. I've got to reset. It doesn't take long, but I got to tell myself, oh, this vehicle has a backup camera. That vehicle does not. So it's kind of weird. But, you look at cars from the 1950s, the rear view mirror on the door wasn't required. And my brother had a 55 Chevy for years. It had no rear view mirror on the door. And he once got pulled over and a cop goes, hey, where's your rear view mirror? My brother goes, it wasn't standard equipment. The guy goes, oh, okay. Wrote him a ticket for something else. So Chris Sinclair says, have a day. Thanks for the videos. Out. I appreciate that. Thank you for checking in. Nico Smith says, best part of your videos is when you laugh at the circumstances or the people. Bacon M13, can the world please bring back the wing windows? I assume you're referring to like a 69 Dodge Charger. The windows go up and down, and in front of them are these windows that can open out like this. And you can do that and get some air flowing through there without opening up the big windows. My Ford Explorers have got windows like that are behind the driver and behind the passenger. You can pop those out. Very similar. I like those windows. I'm assuming they went away just because of ease of manufacture, but I don't know. Homestead Helpers have never owned a vehicle that was not a stick shift. I've owned about half and half. So right now I've got 4 vehicles, 2 automatics, 3 automatics, and one manual, 1 standard shift. So the Viper is a 6-speed. The rest are automatics, including the Cobra. I apologize. Some people don't like that, but I've had everything from an Army truck to a Jeep to the little Dodge Daytonas in the 90s. That were even a Chevy Monza that was a manual shift. And the tow truck I drove at the gas station, which I drove by yesterday, by the way, at Adams, Maple, and Birmingham, Michigan. Tow truck's long gone, but the gas station is still there. That tow truck I drove was a manual transmission as well. Blue Freaker says, always have agreements in writing. Always have them sign it. Always, always, always. And never settle for oral. Only tricks do that. And he's referring to, of course, if you get permission to park someplace where you can get a ticket otherwise. If it's not in writing, it's going to be very, very difficult to fight otherwise. And that is a crying shame. So Rick does say that my company is charging me back for the $3,000. That's why I asked about employment law. And I hope it doesn't come to that, but that is a crying shame. Brian Seltz says wing windows are great until you run into a swarm of bees that go right into your crotch. Well, if you've got them flipped like this, it does, I guess, draw them in a little bit, but you can slam them shut pretty quickly though too. Lewis Browning says 3-speed on the tree. Now, I will admit I've never driven a standard shift with a shifter on the tree. I've never have. My parents had those international travelalls, which we called the Lehto that had the shifters up there. But I've never driven one of those. I understand the concept. I could probably do it, but I never have. Ed's Workouts and Fitness is hello, Steve. First time watching your live. Well, thank you for checking, my friend. Appreciate that. Opus Cat 999. Do you only buy American cars? I only have in my entire life. I've never owned a foreign car. Now, here's the thing. I have people who get mad at me when I say that. And I say, no, I've never told you can't buy one. If I choose not to buy them, I just choose not to buy them. And I grew up in Birmingham, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. And on my street, I can name for you 5 or 6 neighbors of mine who worked for the car companies, vice presidents and presidents and high up executives who worked at American car companies. And everyone on the street owned American cars. It was unusual to see a foreign car. And then, of course, my brother went to work for Ford. I had all kinds of friends and family who worked at the car companies. And I've just never bought a foreign car. And I was talking to Sam Crack, who's got that channel where he rebuilds cars. And I was talking to him, and I said, I'd like to buy one of your cars off of you. And he goes, which one? I said, well, here's the problem. It's got to be American. And he goes, okay, that cuts it way down, because he does so many foreign cars on that channel. Bob Blah Blah says Chevy eliminated the cozy wing on the Camaro, saying it was for noise reduction. And then they introduced astro ventilation. You got to love when car companies come up with names for stuff like that. Wouldn't surprise me. And one thing I can tell you, and this is something you've got to understand, get in a car built in the last 4 or 5 years and drive it down the freeway. Then get in a car built 20 years ago and drive it down the freeway. And noise reduction is something car companies have gotten really, really good at. And so wind noise, it's hard to quantify it, but man, it's amazing how quiet they are. So sadly, as I mentioned a little while ago, I took my dad for a ride in my Cobra yesterday with the top down, of course, because it doesn't have a top. And I was trying to talk to him, and he's already got hearing issues. And so I was driving and leaning over and yelling to him about this far away, and he could just understand me. So wind noise in cars is a real thing. The name that wasn't taken says, would an adverse possession advisory company be legal? Well, if they're doing legal advice and they're attorneys, it'd be legal. Yeah. Adverse possession is not a crime. I mean, jokingly, I've had attorneys tell me that someone who stole something, it's adverse possession. Well, no, adverse possession is where somebody is in possession of something for long enough and under certain circumstances that it becomes theirs. But until it becomes theirs, the true owner can always come and eject them or claim it or whatever it is. And so if somebody were to call me and say, hey, Steve, I got a question for you. I've been living on this piece of property now for 17 years. And I just now discovered it's not mine. I thought it was, but it's not. And there's somebody who shows up on the paperwork as owning it. I think they're dead. I mean, I can advise them as to what to do and what not to do and how to handle that. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's the answer to that question. Mr. Anderson, how did I get here? This is not my beautiful house. It's not my beautiful car. Matt Man, did you see the ad in Car and Driver about Pontiac? No, I did not. I'm not sure what you are thinking of. Randall Munson says, remember the old bumper sticker, hungry, eat your foreign car. Oh, boy. Zizo Mayed says, Mr. Lehto, can you explain what's the deal with the $100 bill in the background of your videos? It is a long-running joke. The $100 bill is in every single video going back about 5 or 6 years, and I move it from day to day, and it's just something people spot. It's like, where's Waldo? There you go. Bears Den, I just watched Jay Leno on his new Rolls with something like 300 pounds of silencing insulation. Yeah. Rolls-Royce, I suspect, got rid of noise a long time ago, but it did make the vehicles heavier. Cyberdoc, if we squat in Lehto's garage for a month, do we get the Viper? That, I believe, is what the woodchuck was asking himself. Second Horizon, love you, Steve O. And your references to 80s music. Oh, and by the way, I meant to mention this. So I mentioned that I went and saw Morris Day and the Time last night in Detroit. It was a spectacular show. I was expecting it to be good. It was actually so good, it blew me away. First of all, no warm-up act. He goes, we're going to start at 8 o'clock. At 8:05, they walked out. Boom. Then they went through all their songs, and the guy still got it. He's dancing like a machine up there. He's got the valet with the mirror, a whole. And so I'm seeing a lot of shows this summer. I'm going to go see the Totally Tubular Festival at Meadowbrook. I'm going to go see Third Eye Blind at Pine Knob. I'm going to go see ELO at the Little Caesars Arena. And so I'm seeing a lot of shows this summer. And a friend of mine asked me, Steve, what's up with that? And I said, you know something? I went to a lot of shows when I was younger. And then somewhere along the line, I stopped going to shows. And every now and then, I hear about a show and I go, I should have gone to see that. And then I realized I don't want to regret these things because there are bands out there I'll never see, like the Bee Gees. 2 out of 3 of them have passed away now. You can't see them anymore. And so the Electric Light Orchestra came to Detroit back in 2019, I think, and I couldn't see that show. And I'm like, I'm never going to see them again. Then they announced they're coming to Detroit in October, I think, of this year. And I made it my goal in life to get the best tickets I could get. And so I got front row tickets to see ELO at Little Caesars Arena. And that band, I've always enjoyed that band. But the first album I ever bought was A New World Record by ELO. So to go see them, even this late in life, will be an experience that I'll cherish. So I told my friend, I go, this is my part of my new going to see shows plan. I need a better name for it than that. Joe Raleigh says, what's the difference between a show and a concert? Quite often, not much. But I will tell you that I would say that what Morris Day and the Time did was a show. Because a concert is a bunch of musicians just playing their instruments. And you can watch them play their instruments, and that can be entertaining. Morris Day came out, and he was visually entertaining to watch. And it was a show. And so I think that there is a distinction to be made. There's a lot of bands that they come out and play, and that's fine. That's fine. I've seen Blue October play, I think, 4 or 5 times now. And they put on a great show, but I would refer to that as a concert because, they're singing, they're playing their instruments. The music is great. But like I said, the Time and Morris Day in particular put a whole different emphasis on making sure it was fun to watch. So that's what I think. And that's just me. Janice Ellery says, hopefully Jeff Lynne will never retire. Yeah, but unfortunately, he's getting up there in age. And that's what worries me is, some of these guys who are older stop touring because they just got older and they can't. Stephen Cook says, that is so true. I missed Harry Chapin, and 6 months later, he was gone. He was my all-time favorite. And that's a great example, and bands break up, but they often get back together again. And so, I've seen the Beach Boys a whole bunch of times. And I've had people go, the Beach Boys. Well, number one, their catalog is huge. Trust me, they put on a great show. But now, of course, a couple of them have passed away. They've broken up. They've reformed. I saw the Beach Boys on the last tour that Brian Wilson did with them. And now I didn't know it at the time, but later on, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was the last tour with Brian Wilson. And that's the one I remember the most. I saw them a bunch of times at Pine Knob, but you don't know when the last time is. So Joel Raleigh says Bruce Springsteen is for sure a concert. I know people who saw Bruce live. I have not, but I've heard people rave about it. Steve Schritz says, saw a video of the Rammstein song performed live. That's a show. Du Hast in Germany with all the pyrotechnics. I've seen them do that too. And I don't understand the German, but boy, it's fun to watch. My new username 47 Beach Boys were great. I saw them twice. Reiner Man, did Eddie Bauer autograph your shirt? No, I've got about a dozen of these, but they weren't autographed by him personally. Michael Doherty, my mother won tickets from an AM radio station to see Harry Chapin. That's back in the day. You could win tickets from a radio station. I actually gave away some concert tickets, but they were always really lame concerts at one of my radio stations. And I'm pretty sure I gave away tickets to concerts that people didn't even bother coming to pick up. They won. Cyberdoc says, "Du hast as you hate me" in German. Yes, but there's more to it than that. It also involves a play on words that has to do with marriage as well. But I'm joking about the rest of the song. Jeopard 4100 says, "I saw Janis Joplin at 3 concerts before she was gone." Wow. Sad Tiger says, "I'm the same, Steve. I'm trying to see whatever shows I can." Jenny W says, "My parents wouldn't let me see the Beatles in San Francisco, which was their last live concert." Is that the Cow Palace? Things pop into my head. I don't know. But yeah, that'd be a crying shame. Can you imagine? Back when tickets were probably like $3 a piece or $4 a piece, but you couldn't hear the band because all the people were shrieking. Try fingers. Will anybody outdo ZZ Top's longevity? You know what's really funny? I will admit, I wasn't a huge ZZ Top fan when it came out. Angels Don't Fall says, "Du hast" means I love you in a sarcastic tone. It's love-hate. But ZZ Top, a lot of their early stuff, I wasn't crazy about it. To me, it got overplayed. I wasn't, but as they've gone on, and I've also come to appreciate their older stuff now, I really respect the fact that it's those 3 guys, and they sound like a bigger band. And I was watching the band last night, and there was, I think, 6 guys on stage with Morris Day, and Blue October's got 6 or 7 guys on stage, and ZZ Top 3 guys, and it sounds like a full sound. I mean, it can be done. So I really respect them, and their longevity is amazing. The fact that guys get together that young and play for that long together is just amazing. And Not a Band Account says, "Why don't American truckers get good wages anymore?" I admit I don't know that much about how truckers get paid, in the sense that my understanding is you can obviously go work where you buy your own truck and you haul stuff for other people. You can go work for a company that has a truck, drive their truck, and they pay you. 2 different things. And if you have your own truck and you're driving for other people, you basically wind up footing all the bills for all of the stuff, like the maintenance on the truck and the breakdowns and the flat tires, all this stuff. I also know that both of them are heavily regulated to where it's a nightmare. I also believe they're all underpaid. All of them. They should make more money. And if you don't believe me on that, you understand if the trucks disappeared, the world would grind to a halt, because everything you touch was on a truck at one point or another. This was on a truck when it came out of the plant in New Jersey, where they put the tap water in a bottle, and then they drove it, put it on a train took it someplace else, put it back on a truck it took it to the store. So trucks touched this 3 or 4 times, okay? But my understanding is that quite often truck drivers have to, in essence, bid on jobs. So somebody will say, "I've got a load that's got to be picked up on this day in this town. It's got to be taken over here to be brought to this town over here. How much will you do that for?" And you can log in and bid on it. And if you are the low bidder, you get it. Now you got to go pick it up and bring it over there. Well, if it's a one-way trip, you got to have something to come back with. So now you try to find a job over here that'll allow you to bring stuff back over here. And I had a client who was a truck driver, and forgive me if I'm not explaining it properly, but he explained it to me at the time where I thought I understood it. And the real problem is that nothing works perfectly. So you got to get here, drop it off, pick up this load over here. What happens if something happens in the middle here? What if your truck gets booted in a Walmart parking lot? And so all kinds of things happen, and that everything that dings you like that comes out of your pay. And so it's a really, really rough existence, and the work is difficult. Now, my throat is getting scratchy. I apologize. But I've got a friend who drives one of those car haulers, but he works for a company. So they just tell him, take these cars over there and take those cars over there, and then bring the truck back. And he does that. And it's extremely difficult work. It's a lot of hard work. And you think about doing it in the wintertime, in the springtime, in the summertime, in the fall, in the snow, in the rain. Oh, I wouldn't want to do it. So Steve Schritz says, I drive for a major company and they run almost exclusively on contracts instead of finding individual loads. Okay. Johnny Knoxville says truckers don't want deadhead miles and also being stranded, rolling empty. Yeah. 0431 USMC. I have owned a small trucking company for 17 years. I'm about to go bankrupt because of rates and regulations. And, it's unfortunate because of interstate commerce being what it is. Truck drivers might be the most regulated thing on earth, short of like the airline industry or something. But the airline industry as a entity can fight the feds. And I don't think the truck drivers quite have the same ability to fight back. And it's unfortunate because I've heard that over and over again about how difficult it is just to deal with it. Earthbound Misfits is Puddle's Pity Party. I've seen him in concert. He's fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. I'd go see him again. The next time he comes to Detroit, I will go see him. Emmanuel Garris says no Diet Coke. When I'm on the air, I drink water. But I had a Diet Coke earlier today, trust me. Chuck Whitehead is checking in. Thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate that. Blue Freaker says everything under the sun is in tune, but the sun is eclipsed by the moon. Oh, boy. Well, and Old Paint 71 says trucking wages is a result of competition in the industry because anyone can get a truck and start a company. Well, there is obviously a barrier to entry because you I presume, have to have a license and a good truck, which costs some money. But you're right; it's people competing against each other for that work. Joel Raleigh says, you've never been around a nuclear reactor. Obviously, otherwise that would be his first regulated industry. I'm sure they're regulated, but I'm talking about how the regulations affect the people in the industry. Michigan's got a nuclear power plant down in Monroe that almost went meltdown a couple of years ago. Quietly, they didn't talk about it much, but it almost did. And I'm sure that the people working that plant and run that plant are heavily regulated. But I suspect the number of truck drivers in Michigan outnumbers the number of nuclear reactor workers by about 1,000 to 1. I could be wrong, but I think that's how I was measuring it. So Mark Gilbert just noticed that the room is your streaming room and it is a backdrop. Well, yes, this backdrop is the backdrop of my videos. I stream from, so I do my video sitting in that chair, talking into that camera. I pop the card out of the camera and I come over to this workstation and I stick it in the computer and I edit it and upload it. And there you go. LL Cool Josh says, you know who else is good? Jerry Reed. Yeah, and so is LL Cool J. LL Cool Josh. Oh boy. Didn't mean to start a political argument. Death Knights R or Death Knight Senior. What do you think about the company Edison Motors building a hybrid Class 8 truck? You think those will take off better than the Tesla Semi? I don't know. I don't know if electric trucks make as much sense, but it's hard to say. They tried turbines in big trucks also. Livy Lynn, hey, Steve, just called for jury duty. Message said all jurors are excused Monday. Then only groups 1 through 50 are excused Monday and a call back for Tuesday. I'm not group 1 through 50. Any clue what they're saying? No. What that means, okay, groups 1 through 50 are excused. Oh, but if you're not in group 150, that means that you're not excused. All jurors are excused Monday. Then if that was a second message saying only groups 1 through 50, I think it means you're not excused. But I wouldn't be surprised if you claimed that confused you and you could get away with it. I would not recommend you do that. You might want to call the court or you may have to show up. That's the problem is if the court tells you to be there at 8:30 and they open at 8:30, if you call them from home and they say, yeah, be here, you might be able to get there fast enough. So Jerry C says there's no dark side of the moon. It's all dark. Well, of course, it's not meant in that sense, but yeah, we've talked about that before. The name that wasn't taken, what do you think of lemonade stands being regulated by the civil authorities? Every now and then you see one of these stories where some kid sets up a lemonade stand and somebody comes by and says, hey, you don't have a permit. And I'm going to fine you like $1,000 a day if you leave this out here. And there's a fine line between letting kids be kids and, teaching them ugly lessons about how government works. But on the other hand, you can imagine if I set up a hot dog stand in Times Square and started selling poisoned hot dogs, maybe it would have made sense for me to have a permit. But there's a big difference between the little kid at the end of the street that their parents versus that strange guy who might be the guy on YouTube selling hot dogs in New York. Not a band account says, how do I get on jury duty? Never get picked past 20 years. Depends on where you are. Remember that quite often there are 3 different places you can get called for jury duty. The federal court, the state circuit court, or the city district court, depending on how your court system is in your state. So in Michigan, in Oakland County, is Birmingham, Michigan. You could be called for 48th District Court for Birmingham. You could be called for Oakland County Circuit Court for Oakland County, or you could be called for federal court, Eastern District. And so each court system uses a different system for where they get their names from. Quite often they go off of registered voters. Sometimes they go off of mailing lists. I've heard them going off of driver's license lists before. I know people who get called every single year. And I know people, one of my brothers has served on more than one jury. Like he survived the process and got onto a couple juries. I've only been called for jury duty once where I had to go someplace. I've gotten a notification saying you might be called for jury duty, but I called in, I was excused. And the one time I went, I actually got voir dired. And they asked me about it, and one of them said, what do you do for a living? And I started off by saying, well, I'm a lawyer. And they go, really? And I say, yeah. And I also teach law school. I teach trial practice. And I'm convinced that when I said that, one of them made the mental note, okay, don't put him on the jury. Because all he's going to do is make fun of how we try the case, which I would have done. Oh, Aaron Spaniak says, I got called for jury duty in Petoskey years ago for an attempted murder trial. The DA was overcharging. He wasn't guilty of attempted murder, but he was a trashy being. Did you serve on the jury or you followed the case afterwards? Just Muxter says, I did 18 months federal grand jury years ago. Very interesting. A grand jury is different and fascinating. I've never been called for one. I know one person who was summoned and asked to be on the grand jury, but when they went and reported and described their work schedule, they said, we're not going to have you on this. A grand jury is a group of people who are from the same pool that jurors are taken from, but they get sworn in, and then a prosecutor presents evidence to them and says, should we indict people, and if so, whom, based on what we presented to you? So Rylantis says, surprised you don't have a better chair. I've got great chairs. I just don't use them on the set. That's a folding chair because I don't want to move on camera. We talk about that every single episode of this channel we do live. Oh, boy. The name that wasn't taken, so the same thing happens to my brother. He's a professor of philosophy, and he just starts talking about the philosophical underlining of the law, and they always excuse him. One of my best friends, Tom, who I talk about occasionally, is a professor of law. I'll have to ask him if he's ever been selected for jury duty, because he could do that too if he wanted to. G Keyman 565 says, are you using a dedicated camera for this live? Well, it is a Logitech camera of some sort, but it's not built into my screen. It's clipped on top. So I'm done with this live stream. I pull the plug on it. My desktop does not have a camera on it, but I'm not using the same camera I use to shoot my videos because that camera's over there on a tripod. I never touch it except to turn it on and turn it off. Not a band account says, is jury duty dramatic and cool like the movies? No. Jury duty is boredom, punctuated by more boredom. And so what'll happen is, heaven forbid you get called for like a 3-week trial. And they go, can you set aside 3 weeks of your life? And you go, okay, fine. My civic duty, I'm going to do it. I'll take 3 weeks off of my, so what I got to do, I'll clear my calendar for 3 weeks. You show up on the first day, they put you in the room and they go, we've got a bunch of pre-trial matters that got to get resolved before we can go to opening statements. So just sit tight. So you're sitting in a waiting room for a while. Then they come get you and they bring you out. They sit you down and then they do opening statements. There's a bunch of objections. And somebody goes, Your Honor, can we make an argument outside the presence of the jury? Jury, stand up, go with the bailiff. You're back out. I've seen it before. They're in and out, in and out. And by the way, they'll read to you a stack of instructions. And some judges will say, by the way, I'm not going to let you have a copy of the instructions. Just pay attention to them and try to remember them. And I've seen jury instructions this thick. The lawyers can't remember them. How can the jurors remember them? And so the back and forth, the waiting. And then like one day they'll go, oh, by the way, the prosecutor is sick. So we're taking a day off. And of course, they're not going to go faster for the rest of the trial. They're going to tack that on at the end. So that 3-week trial just became a 4-week trial. And so it's just, all I ever hear from people who are on jury duty is boring. It was stupid. A lot of stuff we didn't understand. We heard these jury instructions and then we asked the judge to clarify and he said, I'm not going to do that. And so, no, I've often said I'd like to serve on a jury just so I can say I've experienced it. But I have a sneaky feeling that I wouldn't enjoy it. QA Libraries has totally agree with that. The trial was meant to be 2 weeks and changed to 3. Sworn and it went to 4 weeks, ended up doing 6 weeks and a day. Oh, by the way, I can hear thunder and lightning overhead. I can hear the thunder. I don't see any lightning, though, because I see nothing but clouds. So I'm guessing there's dark clouds like over here somewhere. I can actually hear. Well, it stopped now, but I can hear thunder outside, so it's amazing. 0431 USMC says, do you think nuclear multi-million-dollar verdicts will ever change? If someone loses control, crosses the median, truck hits them, they still charge the trucker? I don't know. It's hard to say because there's several different kinds of big verdicts you hear about. You hear about the ones where, the catastrophic accident where a trucker and a car collide and a bunch of people die a fiery death. Then on the other hand, you hear about it where, some company was doing something really, really despicable and injuring people in a marketplace without warning. And you get a multi-million-dollar verdict there too. But I don't know that any of those big verdicts, quote unquote, teach anybody anything, because more often than not, insurance companies pay it. Rates go up, but I'm not sure if my insurance rates go up make me a better driver. So I don't know. I don't know, but that's an interesting question. Johnny Knoxville asks, did you see the trucker in Kentucky who was knocked over the side of the bridge in Louisville? God was looking over her life. Yes, I saw that. And what she swerved or something because somebody's coming at her, and it was a close call, but she made it. Scott Haley says, viral video of that chair giving out during a video. Well, that chair's not going to give out. That's one of them high impact plastic, heavy duty Amazon folding chairs. I stand on that thing all the time, or ones just like it. But all I need is a place to sit and a wall behind me so I don't lean back too far. It's all I need, because I'm not there to be comfortable and get cozy and touchy-feely. I'm sitting there to do the video, and I get up and I leave. So the chair I'm sitting in right now is a work chair. I spend hours in this chair. It's a comfortable chair, okay? So I don't sit on folding chairs while watching TV. DJ Gene says, don't get thunderstruck. AC/DC. Oh. Not a band account says, do law firm interns have souls and feelings? They might when they start, but if it's a big firm, by the time they're done, no. I've unfortunately dealt with some big law firm attorneys at big law firms who've literally lost all sight of what's right in the world. And I can't think of examples right now, but if given time, I could. J. Paul, hey Steve, what are the main reasons for a lawyer to dismiss a jury in jury selection? Keep in mind that you always have a certain number of peremptory strikes that you can strike jurors for any reason if you want to. You can't do it for like race or religion, theoretically, but occasionally you'll see it where you're wondering, I wonder. But cause. So if somebody says, I'm related to a police officer, how? Well, I'm married to one. My husband is a police officer. Okay, the chief witness here is a police officer and the victim's a police officer. I would strike for cause if I was defending that case, right? But the judge might say, well, despite that, could you still be fair and impartial? Oh, yes, of course. Peremptory challenge, Your Honor. Get him out of here. So, Code Meester Beats. I don't know why, but I find it inordinately funny when one of those chintzy plastic yard furniture chairs blows out. Is that like a theme on YouTube or something? I've not seen that. Homestead Helper, Denny Crane. Is that from Boston Legal? I never watched that show, but I know that Captain Kirk made an appearance. Mark Miller, peremptory challenges. Yeah, peremptory challenges are the ones that you can just do for any reason. And, typical trial, let's say you get 3, you get 3. And but I've seen it before. Like 5 or 6 get kicked off for cause, and they don't use any peremptories. So, Matt Man says, Steve, your lives are the best thing on TV, similar to Seinfeld. I appreciate it. Thank you. Earthbound Misfits said I had a heart attack 1 week before grand jury duty. The judge refused to dismiss me. Wow, that's a hardcore judge. Mark Gilbert, did you do your stint in radio because of your practicing of law? No. I worked in radio before I even thought about becoming an attorney. I was a disc jockey for a couple of years. And then I decided to go to law school and become a lawyer. Then afterwards, I did talk radio for the most part and podcasts. So I got into doing this because of my radio background, and I'm a lawyer. Not a banned account asks the big question, is jury nullification legal and reasonable? Well, it depends on how you define those terms, because as anybody can tell you, if you are on a criminal jury, you are one of the 12 people deciding the fate of one of your peers who's accused of a crime. The 12 of you can go back in the room and close the door. And all 12 of you can go, I think he did it. I think he's guilty the way the law is written. But darn it all, I don't want to convict him for whatever reason. And the 12 of you could decide not guilty. You walk back out, Your Honor, we've got a verdict. It's unanimous. Judge reads it. What? Not guilty. But we all know he did it. Not guilty. Gavel gets banged. Guy gets released. Jury leaves. Somebody talks to the jury and goes, why did you guys find that guy not guilty? He did it. Oh, yeah, we know. Okay, well, isn't it wrong? No, because it turns out the jury can do anything they want. Deliberations are supposed to be secret, and you can't retry the person due to the double jeopardy clause. And so theoretically, a jury can do anything it wants. But the concept of jury nullification itself is not something that you can talk about in front of a jury, because the fear is that defendants who are somehow sympathetic but guilty will hire attorneys who are going to get up and go, something? Whether or not my client did it, doesn't matter. You can find him not guilty. Jury nullification gives you, and they're concerned that if people are told that explicitly, that everything will just go this way, and suddenly that's all you're going to hear about. And so there have been cases before where people have come forward and said that jury was acting by nullification as opposed to doing their duty. Because they tell you, you take an oath and swear that you will pay attention to the facts and rule on the law as given to you by the judge, that you're not going to disregard all that. But you're allowed to disregard all that. But telling somebody that can actually get you a foul of the law. A judge can hold you in contempt for that. Is that right? There is no answer to that. It's an opinion policy issue. So that's been the case for decades. And I know that there was a case here in Michigan where a guy got a pamphlet on jury nullification and he printed up a stack of them, and he'd go stand near the courthouse and hand them out to people, hoping that potential jurors would get them. And a potential juror might read that and go, oh, we can nullify. And so then the judge had that guy arrested. And it became a big mess. And it brought that back out to the forefront. And so, again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a question of, And Rob C says, you just described the OJ jury. Many people believe that. Many people do. Michael Lawless says, the prosecutor and judge don't like someone else having absolute power. Go figure. One thing I like to tell people, and I used to tell this to my clients. I tell it to my students when I taught law practice, trial practice. I would tell people, I'd say, anytime in a courtroom in a jury trial, pay very close attention. Because when the judge walks in the room, everybody stands up. And then everybody sits down, the judge talks, and then they call the jury in the room. And everybody stands up, including the judge. And so that's what you've got to remember, is that in the grand scheme of things, it's the jury, the judge, and the litigants. And so, yeah, the judge is important, has got a lot of power. The jury's got more power. And even the judge recognizes that implicitly by standing up when they walk in. J. Paul, what age did they stop selecting a person for jury duty? I'm not sure they have a cutoff, although I wouldn't be surprised if some letters they send out for jury selection say things such as, if you're going to have a hard time sitting for long periods of time due to age or physical condition, let us know. And I suspect if you're over the age of probably 55 or so and claimed you had physical problems, they're probably going to go, you know something, you're fine. As long as they got a big jury pool, they can do that. Oh, USS Gray Ghost. What was the worst weather you showed up to a court case during, and what are you showed up to court case only to find out it was canceled? I've never had a court case canceled because of the weather. Judges always somehow manage to show up. But I can tell you that if you said, Steve, think of the top 5 times that you've been pissed off in court, rightfully so. Give us those 5. Among those 5 would be the time I went to Dearborn District Court in the age before cell phones. This must have been about 1991. Didn't have a cell phone yet. I'm driving to court, and there is snow falling to where it's like 14 inches of snow, something crazy. And I left early, and I got to be at court by 9 a.m. 9 a.m. And it's just a motion call. It's not a trial or anything. It's a pretrial conference at 9 a.m. At 9 a.m., I pull in the parking lot, which is not plowed, and my car got stuck. So I walked in, I found a bailiff, and I said, hey, look, my car is stuck. What should I do? And the guy looked out where it was, and he goes, you know something? I think you're good, but a plow is coming in a little while. So I think they can get around your car where it is because it was kind of at the end of a row. I think you're okay. I think you're good. And I said, okay. So then we walk back inside. I go through the metal detectors, all that stuff, and boom, we go inside. And there might not have been metal detectors yet. I just realized that. But anyways, I go into the courtroom, and I check in with the clerk. And I say, I'm Steve Lehto. I'm here on behalf of this client in this case. And they go, okay, thank you. And they note that. And I'm sitting there. And finally, every single case has been called but mine. And then I realize I'm all alone. My opponent's not here. Judge looks at me and goes, what are you doing here? And I go, I'm here on the such and such case. And he goes, oh, yeah, we called that. That was the first case we called. So I go, well, I was in the courtroom at 9:05. Judge goes, yeah, we called it at 9. I go, but there was 20 sets of people on the list. Why would you call mine at 9:05 when you could have just put it over and called it later? Judge goes, well, you weren't here. Notice it's 9 o'clock. I said, I was in the parking lot at 9 o'clock. My car is stuck. I talked to your bailiff and wanted to make sure that was taken care of. And so I walked in here at 9:05 and checked in with your clerk. Your clerk could have said, hey, we just called your case, and didn't. And the judge goes, well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Lehto, I've already dismissed your case because you weren't here. So if you want to reinstate it, you got to pay $500 in costs. So I had to pay $500 in costs because my car got stuck in their parking lot, which wasn't plowed. I was actually in the building, I believe, at 9 o'clock or 9:01, but it was close, real close. And I've never seen a judge call a case and go, oh, the other side's not here on a snowy day. I'm going to dismiss the case. Never seen that in my entire life since. Never. Paid the $500 and wound up getting the money out of the other end when the case settled. Came out of my fee, basically. But that was a judge who should not have been on the bench. He was an incompetent moron. And luckily, he's not on the bench anymore. But there are some people who should not be judges. They literally shouldn't be judges, and that was one of them. And so that's among the top 5 bad examples. That was weather. And if I had a cell phone, I could have called the court. But again, like I said, 1991. So not a banned account. This is how is it constitutional to go around double jeopardy by prosecuting somebody again for the same alleged act, but different charge or jurisdiction? That is a very interesting question, and it comes up a lot. The best example I can give you is the Rodney King police officers who were found not guilty of state charges for beating him. Hang on. Must be the heat or something. My throat's killing me. I'm not sure how much longer I can go on. Hang on. And so the feds brought charges against him for violating Rodney King's civil rights. And the courts have said, well, those two charges are different enough that even though they arise in the same transaction, there's nothing wrong with bringing them separately because they can't be brought in the same action. In other words, you can't prosecute someone in state court for a federal crime or vice versa. So that's the thinking, but I see how it looks weird. And I've seen other cases where it seemed odd, and I've seen other cases where it made sense. And quite often, it's where a local state jury lets somebody slide, but the federal jury doesn't. So Cyberdoc says, Steve, it could have been worse. The plow truck could have crashed into your vehicle. Michael Wallace says, yeah, the cough button. Yeah, that I remember to use it that time. The Nessie Blue microphone's got a cough button and 0 latency too, almost. So Guy Lee checking in from Lindenwald. Appreciate that, my friend. The name that wasn't taken, we believe in you. More water, less talking. Well, unfortunately, if I don't talk a lot, this room goes really quiet. Lux and Honor checks in. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I really do. Rylantia says, in a recent video, you mentioned a judge ruling without a jury verdict. Is that due to the lack of facts being in dispute and that the judge and the juries have different purposes? Yes. And that's something very, very many people get confused by. So let's suppose, I'm going to make up stuff here. And I'm talking about civil cases, okay? So I sue you, and I say, you owe me $100. And you go, yes, I do. And I say, pay me. And you go, no, not going to pay you. But you owe me the money. Yes, I do. You admit you owe me the money. Yes, I do. So I file a lawsuit against you. And I say, this person owes me money. They won't pay me. And we go into court and you file an answer. And you go, yes, I do owe them the money. But I want a jury trial. In a civil case, you won't get one. Because I'll bring a motion for summary judgment or summary disposition, we call it in Michigan, and say there's nothing in dispute here. They admit they owe me the money. Let's just reduce this right now to a judgment. And a judge will look at you and go, seriously, do you have a defense or not? If you admit you owe the money, you either pay him or he gets a judgment. And so it's quite often a little more complicated than that, but it's often legal nuances where somebody will bring a lawsuit and the defendants will say they can't bring that lawsuit because there's technical difficulty here. And sometimes you can amend your complaint to fix the problem, and sometimes you can't. But a best example I can give you is somebody files a lawsuit against you after the statute of limitations is run. And their defense is, statute of limitations is run. And a judge looks at it and goes, here's where it happened. Here's where we are today. Lawsuit was filed here. You're out. There you go. Statute of limitations, an absolute bar to that claim. So, Opinion Rat says, more rock, less talk. Now, the bottle is empty, but it was not full when I started. I've never finished one off before, and I thought I'd bring up a half full one. So here we are. Ian the Ghost Rider says, hey, Steve, quick question about jury duty. My biological dad is a lawyer of over 30 years, plus retired assistant prosecutor. He taught me law over the years. Could that be an issue if I get called? No. If they ask you, are you an attorney? No. Do you know any attorneys? Yeah, my dad. Does that change your opinion on the law, or does that make it where you couldn't rule on this case? That shouldn't be a problem. I mean, lawyers can serve on juries. I've known lawyers who've served on more than one jury. It happens. Ever dealt with opposition withholding evidence? Not really, because my car cases are pretty straightforward. It's just warranty records and purchase documents. But I did once accidentally. I had an opponent of mine. I got to be very careful about this. I had an opponent of mine accidentally send me a document he wasn't supposed to send me, and it was really bad. And when he found out I had it, he freaked out, and he went to court to have the judge order me to give it back to them and not disseminate it to anybody, which I did, but I forced him to go to court on it because what the letter that I saw showed was that somebody on the other side was doing something unethical and dishonest, and they knew it, and they didn't think they'd get caught, just so long as nobody sees this letter. And the judge was not happy with me. The judge goes, "Mr. Lehto, I'm going to make you give that letter back to them." And I said, "Oh yeah, it's fine." And everybody in the room knew I was doing this because I made a record. I got to say, this letter says this, 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 and this. And as a result of that, I thought it was important that and I had an excuse as to why I should be able to use it. And the judge was, "I'm not going to let you do that." I'm like, "Okay." And everybody in the courtroom's giggling because they know that I did that, because now I don't have the letter anymore, but I read it into the record. Now, what can you do with it? I don't know, but it's kind of funny. Do judges develop specialties? Asks Michael Lawless. And I've heard of one judge that handled all the asbestos cases. Believe it or not, a lot of courts will assign those cases or specialized cases to one judge because they specialize in it, or because it's like a de facto specialization. But there are some courts that have, like, say, family law court, business law court. And so Oakland County Circuit Court actually has judges assigned to business law. So you file a business law case in Oakland County, it gets assigned to one of a couple of different judges. But asbestos cases, since they're all alike, they'll just send them all to this one judge. The silicone breast implant cases was another one where they're all assigned to particular judges in different courthouses. So it depends, but I've heard of that. But it's not judges saying, "Hey, today I've chosen to specialize in lemon law cases." Attorneys often specialize, but judges themselves don't have that choice. STP World says, "I found my Beatles white album on white vinyl. It's real first edition, no barcode, worth quite a bit." Good. I never was a big album collector in that sense. I was listening to my records. I once had a copy of Purple Rain on purple vinyl. That was a radio station promo that we got at a radio station. I worked at a station that didn't play Prince, but they sent us a copy anyway. Slow down. What's the most absurd traffic case you've been asked to defend? Well, I don't defend people on absurd cases, but I've seen some. I've represented a lot of people at the Woodward Dream Cruise who got tickets for, like, they'd spin their tires and a cop would write them up for reckless driving. I mean, I took 3 of those to jury trials, so I thought those were absurd, but the cops who wrote them didn't. Prosecutors went along with it. So Jay Paul says, "Have you been in any car shows this year? I'm south of Detroit." Well, I went to the Pasteiners parking yesterday at 14 Mile and Woodward Avenue in Birmingham. First time there this year, though. I brought my Cobra. Hadn't had it out yet on a long drive. I rolled it over to 500 miles yesterday. 500. Not a banned account. Asked, ever oppose a scummy Saul Goodman sort of lawyer? I've had some attorneys that I thought were kind of unethical, and you kind of have to watch out for them. But nothing terribly bad. A lot of stuff on TV is, exaggerated and distorted for entertainment purposes. And sadly, a lot of this stuff's written by people who don't know how the law works. But Alex K. ever talked to Scotty Kilmer? No. I'm familiar with his channel. I know he's quite popular. I've never talked to him. Aaron Freeman, Ypsilanti needs a lemon law judge. What are you doing Monday? STP World, did you ever have to deal with the TV lawyers? You mean the ones who advertise on TV? No, the ones I know about are usually personal injury and so on. Choo Choo 405, greetings, Steve. J. Paul says 500. You got to be careful. You may have to change the oil. No, believe it or not, they already did the break-in period. We've already changed the oil the first time. I think that was done about 100 miles, 50 or 100. The name that wasn't taken says, "Did you watch the Better Call Saul series?" No, I did not. I watched the first episode or two, and it just didn't do it for me. And I don't know. I'm not saying it's a bad show. It just didn't click. And once in a while, shows do that. That guy's personality just didn't appeal to me. So, Aaron, are you going to defend yourself for the burnout with the Cobra? Here's the question. I haven't gotten those tires to spin just yet. On the Viper, I've spun them a couple times by accident, of course. But the Cobra, I haven't spun them yet, but that would be a scary prospect. They're gigantic tires, number one. But number two, I don't want to lose control of that until I get a lot more experience behind the wheel. And I don't want to lose control of it at all. Harley D says, what kind of Cobra does Steve have? I've got a backdraft replica Cobra that was built last year. It's got 500 miles on it. It's got a Roush third generation Coyote 5-liter aluminum block engine in it. It has the same horsepower as my Viper, but is 1,000 pounds lighter. Not a banned account. Thoughts on why Boeing whistleblowers are so unlucky? I don't mean to laugh at that, but people have noticed that if you become a whistleblower for Boeing, your life expectancy suddenly gets called into question. And people wonder if that is mere coincidence or not. I don't know. Cyberdox's Cobras are tough to control with that short wheelbase. Well, yeah, and lack of traction control and things of that nature don't help. But my thinking is always keep it pointed straight. Just keep it pointed straight. You'll be fine for most of the time. Josiah Hanna says, hey, Steve, I'll be in the Copper Country next weekend. Where are you going? Always enjoy being up there. Haven't been up there yet this year. I'm going up in June, however. I will be up there in June. Marcus Strangle says, Lehto's Garage Channel or tour when? Well, it's not much of a tour. It's just 2 cars. I got 2 cars in my garage. And here, this is the multimedia experience you get with watching a live stream. There's my 2 cars in my garage. Okay. So that's a Viper in red and a Cobra in blue and white. So there you go. Don't ever say I didn't make this into a multimedia experience. Mr. This is me too. Steve, thoughts on the lemon laws coming off the RV industry? They'll fight that. They will fight that tooth and nail. In fact, they do fight that. They've got a whole lobbying arm that does nothing but fight lemon laws in various states, trying to keep them from coming into states. Some states have got them, but they often only cover the driving portion of the vehicle, the drivetrain and the cab, that kind of thing. But it'll be a while if it ever happens. Michael Doherty says, keep your vehicle pointed in the direction you want to go or you'll be headed towards disaster. Yeah, and by the way, you realize that every Mustang and Camaro you've ever seen crash outside of Cars and Coffee did that because as they're pulling out, they stepped on it before the car got straight. So as they're sliding sideways, they step on it. The wheels break loose and the car continues to slide. Now the car's not straight anymore. And what's over here? Oh, a tree. Bam. And that's the explanation for almost every single crash you've ever seen at a Cars and Coffee. I mean, I've seen guys who pull out, back end loses it. They do a bunch of fishtails and they wind up rolling the car, like taking a Mustang and getting it to tumble, like barrel roll down the road. And I'm like, I don't know. You could try to do that and make it happen. I mean, that's crazy. So Josh says, hey, how about the canoe out this time of year? Haven't done it yet. I might. Didn't get it out last year. It's too busy, but I might this year. Second Horizons has got to go. Have people waiting. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. Reinhard Man says, is the Cobra real or replica? It is a backdraft Cobra replica. So it is a replica. It's got a modern drivetrain. It was built last year. For those of you who don't know, Cobras are based on cars built back in the 60s. And just because this is a multimedia experience, I'll show you this. But a Cobra crossed the block at Mecum just last week for $1.9 million. $1.95 million. So no, I do not have a real Cobra. I can't afford one just yet. Mr. This Is Me Too is that a factory 5 is a backdraft. When I say it's a backdraft Cobra, Backdraft is the company that built it. And for those of you who don't know, my good friend Mark Lieberman at Nostalgic Motoring is the guy who ordered it. I ordered it through him. I took delivery through him and took delivery at his place in Auburn Hills. So I absolutely love that car. And in fact, I'm going to call it now. My throat still hurts. I don't know what's going on. I don't think it's just talking too much. It's a problem of mine. So I will talk to you guys and gals, all 10% of you, a week from today, assuming everything works out. My calendar is clear right now, but things happen. I'm also going to see a concert Tuesday night in Detroit. We'll talk about that then. Until then, behave yourself. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.